A judge just unsealed private messages in the Blake Lively-Justin Baldoni fight. PR chess, a reporter's walk back, and a line that reads like, "No fingerprints." Tonight, we separate what's in the filings from what's just internet noise. And what comes next might surprise you. This didn't start with a headline. It started with filings. A creative partnership frayed, lawyers stepped in, and the story moved from premieres to pleadings. Across winter and spring, motions trimmed some claims while others survived. That's the messy middle where narratives harden online long before a courtroom ever hears sworn testimony. And now, with new exhibits unsealed, everyone's treating PDFs like verdicts. Unsealed doesn't mean proven, it means the public can read communications that will be argued over later. That distinction matters, but it's also where the drama lives. And the next pages raise the stakes. One message turned into a lightning rod. A journalist whose earlier private text had been quoted in the case clarified the phrasing months later, under oath. A charged term, he said, wasn't language he'd attributed to the publicists involved. For viewers, that's not trivia. It's gravity. If a single line helped supercharge an allegation and the original source narrows or corrects it in a declaration, the narrative tilts. Not to innocence, not to guilt, but away from certainty built on one text thread. And when certainty fades, you're forced back to what the documents actually say. Not what they imply. That's a good place to be. But that wasn't the whole story. Inside the newly public exhibits, one proposal keeps getting screenshotted. A crisis communications plan pegged at a 5-figure monthly retainer for a short window, with language that reads like digital mitigation, search shaping, and rapid response. The pitch, as presented, leans on monitoring hostile content, steering narratives, and leaving minimal traces. Lively's side points to this as proof of a coordinated character hit. Baldoni's orbit frames it as standard defense after reputational claims hit the press. Those two descriptions can't both be equally right, but they can both be incomplete. A crisis plan can exist on paper without proving a smear. It can also be executed in ways that cross ethical lines, even if the contract sounds routine. The exhibits give you the outline. The courtroom will ask whether the coloring stayed inside the lines. And that's where the next discrepancy enters. Money math became a storyline of its own. Online, a giant round number went viral. In filings and reporting, the numbers tied to proposals look far smaller. Think monthly retainers, not blank check megabucks. Why the confusion? Because screenshots travel faster than context, and a dramatic figure is better bait than an invoice schedule. The interesting part isn't the sticker price, it's the intent behind the line items. Monitor search terms, seed context, preempt hostile posts, manage landmines. And yes, one note fretted about the possibility of a massive fan base activation, the kind of wave that can turn a weekend dust-up into a month-long reputational storm. If you've ever watched how fast a fandom can move, you know why that line reads like DEFCON. But are we looking at planning or proof of wrongdoing? The answer depends on execution, not aspiration. And execution leaves tracks somewhere. Zoom in on the publicist problem. The name at the center of commentary appears again and again in creator recaps. Supporters on one side say a seasoned PR hand pushed stories too hard, feeding tabloids claims that never fully materialized. The other side says that's spin. What they did was defensive triage against escalating allegations that threatened personal and professional standing. The truth is likely more granular than either headline. PR people pitch, reporters filter, editors assign. And somewhere in those handoffs, nuance gets sanded down. That's why the reporter's later clarification mattered. It didn't absolve everyone or indict anyone. It narrowed one volatile claim to what the source would actually stand behind. In a fight where words are weapons, a single rephrasing can blunt an entire blade. But there's a second battlefield here, and it isn't the press. Creators turbocharged this story. Channels live streamed, docket drops, parsed exhibits on camera, and stitched commentary into timelines tight enough to feel like breaking news. That energy is great at forcing transparency and awful at respecting probabilities. A spicy excerpt feels like a verdict when it's really a puzzle piece. So here's the simple filter. Ask whether a claim is anchored to a public document or welded to an interpretation of private chat. Then ask whether the document is evidence of a fact or evidence of a person saying a thing. Those are not the same. Once you start sorting that way, hype quiets down. You start seeing proposals versus actions, talking points versus conduct, and declarations versus DMS. It makes the story less dramatic and more accurate. And accuracy is what holds up when the court calendar finally matters. So, what would actually move the needle? 3 things: sworn testimony that aligns with contemporaneous records, rather than curated recollections, third-party materials, emails, contracts, payment logs that corroborate who said what, who paid what, and who pushed which buttons online, and court orders that force disclosures, limit tactics, or sanction behavior. All 3 convert chatter into consequences. Everything else is a predictor at best. If the next round of filings comes with authenticated chains that tie a strategy to a measurable hit, search results captured before and after, traffic shifts, ad pulls, lost deals linked in writing, that's when a judge starts to see damage beyond vibes. If instead what we get are proposals that read edgy and a public already primed to react for unrelated reasons, the story becomes less about orchestration and more about timing. That distinction isn't sexy, but it's the difference between smear as a headline and defense as a rationale. And the law cares about that difference. Context also matters. Part of the backlash around Lively's promotion of a sensitive storyline was already simmering before some of these proposals appear in the record. If that's right, then a crisis plan might have been late to a fire. It didn't start. That doesn't excuse every tactic. It reframes the question. Were PR contractors fanning flames or trying to keep sparks off the carpet? Critics say the language, no fingerprints, landmines, sounds like covert agitation, not cleanup. Defenders say those phrases are jargon, ugly but standard, and that the work amounted to monitoring and counter-messaging. The exhibits show intent. What's missing is a clean causal chain from pitch, deck, to public damage. Build that chain and the case changes. Fail to build it and the heat moves off the plan and back onto the original allegations. Either way, the clock is ticking. There's also the human factor, pride, fear, and the instinct to win the story before you win the case. Private messages carry a heat that doesn't age well, and when they land in public, it's tempting to read them like confessions. They're not. They're snapshots of people under pressure telling themselves they still have control. Sometimes they're exaggerating to reassure colleagues. Sometimes they're underselling to avoid panic. And occasionally, they're telegraphing a strategy they fully intend to deploy. The difference only becomes clear when testimony, metadata, and money trails converge. Until then, treat DMS like weather reports from inside a storm. Useful, emotional, and incomplete. That's not a defense. It's a warning label. If you're keeping score, here's the sober version. The unsealed exhibits illuminate. They don't conclude. A reporter's later clarification narrows one explosive allegation, but it doesn't settle the larger fight. The PR plan language is aggressive, and the ethics questions are real. Yet intent isn't liability without proof of false statements causing measurable harm. The online numbers dispute tells you less about budgets and more about how rumor outruns nuance. And the creator ecosystem keeps pressure high while multiplying speculation. The next meaningful shift will come from sworn words, verified records, or a judge's pen, probably in that order. Everything else belongs to the conversation, not the verdict. So, where does that leave us? In the uncomfortable middle where patience beats virality. If more exhibits drop, we'll read them against the record, not the rumor. If testimony lands, we'll follow what it corroborates, not what it suggests. And if the court pushes this toward a trial window down the line, remember, timelines slip, narratives don't. They harden. That's why this video exists, to keep the story flexible until the facts settle. Because when enough pieces lock, the picture won't need commentary. It will explain itself. For now, the only honest ending is this. Filings are filings, commentary is commentary, and the truth will live where those two finally meet. And what happens the moment they do might not be the ending anyone's been rehearsing. But that's the point, isn't it?